You've heard from some so-called gun gurus that 9mm ammo is weak, and you might have heard rumors that some military leaders want it gone. But is there any truth to all this? Is 9mm really so inferior that the very folks who adopted it decades ago are now wanting to dump it for good? In this video, we'll talk about the reality behind that controversy, the reasons why the military is fed up with 9mm, and the surprising irony that civilians can actually get better performance than our troops in uniform. Let me start with a quick backstory on how 9mm became so widespread. Many of us appreciate the 9mm cartridge for its manageable recoil, solid capacity in compact platforms, and affordable cost compared to other calibers. But younger people might not know its story. It was developed in the early 1900s and, over time, became a NATO standard. The United States military made the transition from .45 ACP to 9mm in the 1980s, embracing the Beretta M9 as the service pistol. At the time, they believed this shift would save money, simplify logistics with NATO allies, and let more personnel shoot with better accuracy thanks to lower recoil. That all sounded great, right? For quite a while, it seemed to live up to the hype. However, the world changes, threats evolve, and so do ballistic expectations. That's where the trouble begins. The military discovered that the 9mm full metal jacket round lacks the immediate stopping power people often associate with other cartridges, especially in the rough environment of real combat. Full metal jackets can go straight through a target without creating the kind of incapacitation effect that hollow points can deliver. In civilian carry circles, we can purchase hollow points like Federal HSTs, Spear Gold Dots, etc. These expand inside a threat and transfer more energy while reducing overpenetration. Yet for military personnel, international agreements hold them to full metal jacket ammo. With those restrictions, the 9mm round loses much of what makes it appealing to folks like you and me. If you're a fellow supporter of the Second Amendment, you've likely heard debates over which round performs best. Many of us champion 9mm because we see how great it can be when it uses modern hollow point and even fluted monolithic copper designs. The performance difference between 9mm FMJ and these premium options is night and day. That begs the question, why can't the troops simply use the same ammo we use for self-defense at home? The answer lies in the Hague Convention of 1899, which restricts armies from using expanding bullets in warfare. This agreement was meant to minimize unnecessary suffering, but it leaves the 9mm round severely handicapped. Overpenetration becomes a real problem, requiring multiple hits to stop a determined adversary, especially one wearing thick clothing or body armor. The net result is a weird situation in which the civilian version of 9mm is arguably more effective than the military version. Civilians get access to sophisticated hollow points, and that means a single well-placed shot can pack far more punch. Meanwhile, uniformed personnel are legally stuck with ammo that can pass clean through targets or fail to create the trauma needed to neutralize threats quickly. Frustration has been brewing for years. Soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan reported needing multiple rounds to incapacitate insurgents, especially those fueled by adrenaline or substances. Obviously, shot placement still reigns supreme, but there's no question that better bullet design can make a difference when lives hang in the balance. Now, some in the military are saying, if we can't have the good version of 9mm, maybe we should ditch it entirely. It's almost like some jealous boyfriend scenario. If I can't have you, no one can. In the case of these military men, if 9mm can't be used at its best potential in their hands, then why does it exist in the first place? To outright say the military wants the 9mm band might seem a little exaggerated, but it's rooted in a real desire to replace the caliber for official service use. In other words, they want it off the roster for future purchases and eventually phased out. They're not asking civilians to lose their beloved 9mm handguns, and they're not trying to pass laws taking away your carry ammo. They're simply fed up with being stuck with what they perceive as a subpar version of an otherwise excellent cartridge. Before we go deeper, let me know your thoughts. Do you believe the military is justified in wanting to be rid of 9mm because of FMJ limitations, or should they push harder to challenge these old conventions? Drop a comment below, and let's discuss. Your voice matters, and I'm curious how you see this from a Pro 2A perspective. Moving on, let's examine how this dissatisfaction showed up in real-world scenarios. Throughout the global war on terror, accounts came in about pistol engagements requiring more rounds than expected. When squads kicked down doors in tight urban spaces, the 9mm FMJ risked zipping right through targets and potentially injuring bystanders. Meanwhile, hollow points in civilian or law enforcement situations are known to expand and dump most of their energy in the target, which is exactly what you want to reduce the risk of overpenetration. The difference is so dramatic that it's easy to see why soldiers might envy the self-defense ammo we can buy at our local store. They look at these ballistics gel tests on YouTube, watch hollow points mushroom beautifully, and think, wait, we can't use that? There have also been incidents of threats failing to go down fast enough after being hit by 9mm FMJs, and that's not what you want to hear in the middle of a firefight. Sure, shot placement is key, but in chaotic conditions, multiple follow-up shots might be necessary. If your sidearm is your last resort, you want it to be as effective as possible when it finally comes out. Now, some special operations forces enjoy slight exemptions. SOCOM units have been known to use certain hollow point designs or have access to different calibers, but that's not the standard across the entire military. If you're a regular soldier, you're still relying on standard-issue 9mm ball ammo. You might ask why the United States doesn't just move to a 40 or 45 across the board and forget about the entire problem. After all, the 45 ACP was standard for decades, and many of us love that old warhorse. The snag is that 45 and 40 come with their own challenges. They're heavier to carry, produce more recoil, and might not be as cheap or as widely available worldwide. NATO allies primarily use 9mm, so logistically, it made sense to keep everything uniform. But now we're hearing rumblings about 357 SIG, 10mm, and even suppressor-friendly PDW rounds like 300 Blackout. That might sound dramatic, but the idea is that if you're forced to stick with ball ammo, maybe a bigger or faster bullet will deliver better immediate results. There's also the bigger trend of militaries looking at next-generation weapons for everything from sidearms to squad-level firearms. The Army's next-generation squad weapon program focuses on 6.8mm for rifles, indicating they want more terminal performance in the field. This is part of a broader push for improved ballistic capabilities. It stands to reason that the brass are considering ways to enhance handgun performance as well. While the new SIG M17 and M18 pistols remain 9mm, they're modular. That modular design could, in theory, be adapted to other calibers if the ammunition is deemed worth pursuing. None of this is guaranteed, but the door is open. Let's not ignore the fact that 9mm is still king in civilian carry. Many people, including me, love using 9mm pistols for personal defense. The recoil is relatively light, which makes accurate follow-up shots much simpler. You can fit more rounds in your magazine compared to 45 or 10mm. And if you buy premium defensive ammo, you gain plenty of stopping power, consistent expansion, and depth of penetration that satisfies FBI guidelines. The difference is that we're not bound by the Hague Convention. We can harness the full potential of the 9mm cartridge, which is why this whole talk of wanting 9mm banned sounds bizarre to a lot of folks. From our vantage point, 9mm is lethal enough, provided you're using the right ammunition. The key phrase is the right ammunition. The military doesn't have that luxury. Interestingly, the FBI once moved from 9mm to 40S and W because of ballistic concerns after the 1986 Miami-Dade shootout, but swung back to 9mm some 3 decades later, citing huge improvements in terminal performance due to modern bullet tech. That shift made sense for them, considering that law enforcement officers can also use hollow points and fluted monolithic copper bullets. Despite that back and forth, we often see cops today carrying 9mm loaded with high-quality defensive rounds, and they're having success. So for many Americans, it feels like a no-brainer. 9mm works. Why would anyone want it gone? But again, that's the crux of this bitter irony. The Army can't adopt the same ammo the FBI can. It's purely about legal limitations. From the military's perspective, it's like walking into a race while everyone else is driving top-tier sports cars, and you're forced to roll out in a vehicle with half its potential locked away. All of these factors come together to create tension. There's talk within certain procurement offices about looking for a better caliber. There's also the new trend of pistols with red dot optics. Modern sidearm design is expanding rapidly, so it wouldn't shock me if the Army eventually runs with a pistol chambered in a round that's not 9mm. However, that's a logistical nightmare. Billions have been invested in 9mm stocks and equipment, plus NATO standardization is no small hurdle. So, is 9mm going to vanish from the military overnight? Almost certainly not. Bureaucracies move slowly, and it would be a major undertaking to rearm the entire force with a new caliber. But we have already witnessed specialized units slowly step away from 9mm or choose different solutions for close-quarters operations. It makes sense. If you're in special operations, you might get special leeway to use hollow points, or you might rely more on short-barreled rifles or submachine guns in a bigger caliber. The standard grunt doesn't always get that choice. As that frustration grows, we're seeing a push to simply declare, "We're done with this round." Despite that push, 9mm is not going anywhere in the civilian world. If anything, it's still the most common handgun caliber by a large margin. People appreciate the capacity, the lighter recoil, and modern defensive ammo's consistent performance. Think about how many polymer-framed striker-fired pistols are out there on the market, all built around the idea that 9mm is the sweet spot for the average shooter. If you're a concealed carrier, there's a good chance you rely on 9mm, and you have plenty of reasons to do so. Let's pause for a second and emphasize, the military's bitterness toward 9mm is not a statement about it being worthless. Their argument is that without expanding ammo, the ballistic performance is less than ideal. They're not trying to pass laws that hurt law-abiding citizens who enjoy 9mm for self-defense. They're simply looking at the harsh realities of warfighting and saying, if we can't load it to its full potential, we'd rather switch to a platform that's more effective with ball ammo. That is a very niche concern. The rest of us can take advantage of all the engineering that's gone into 9mm defensive ammunition. Now that we've laid out the facts, I want to hear from you. Does it surprise you that the military is so fed up with the round that they once embraced? Do you think they should keep trying to improve 9mm ball designs or just move on to a bigger or hotter caliber? Sound off in the comments. Keep it Pro 2A because that's where I'm coming from. Your viewpoint as a fellow defender of the Second Amendment is always welcomed. When you peel back the layers, the so-called ban the military wants is really just them wanting to phase out or block future contracts for 9mm sidearms. They've seen enough to believe that as long as the Hague rules stay in place, it's just not meeting their operational needs. There's also a growing concern about adversaries wearing advanced body armor. If you're stuck with full metal jacket 9mm, it might not be as reliable in putting down threats who have upgraded their protective gear. Combine that with the reality of close-quarters engagements in urban warfare. Rooms can be cramped, and innocent civilians may be in the next room or on the other side of a thin wall. Overpenetration can be catastrophic, and that's the last thing you want on a mission. Meanwhile, a civilian with legal JHPs in a defensive shooting scenario is much less likely to face those same constraints. Let's be honest. There's a reason the FBI reversed its earlier stance and came back to 9mm. Shot placement plus modern ammo is a lethal combination, but that advantage disappears when you remove the advanced bullet designs. It just does. But what do you think? If the military is going to look for a new standard-issue sidearm and pistol caliber, what would it be? And why? Comment below. I'm curious to know what you all have to say about this. And while you're down there, please like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching.